Okay, so we finally make it after some technical difficulties.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so you're our first guest on our little weekday impromptu show that I started in order to kind of help businesses, creatives and businesses with, this pandemic crisis.
Yes.
You're our first
you.
guest.
Thank you for having me. I'm the first one. I'm so honored.
Yes, I know. So, do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Oh, okay. Thank you. So I'm Karolina, and I'm the editor of Estila magazine and the chief storyteller of Studio Estila. So we have basically two sides to our business. We have the publishing side where we tell stories of independent brands, lifestyle brands, fashion startups, artists, creatives, anybody who's in the lifestyle sector, and we tell their stories and we connect them to each other through the storytelling and then through my network. So that's on one side, and on the other side I basically design brand stories, and we create brand storytelling campaigns, marketing strategies. We give brands tools to work with, and everything we based around customer experience and building customer loyalty. So that's
which
what we
one
do.
which one came first, the magazine or the studio?
Well, it's sort of, I've always been doing the studio things, but not necessarily as a studio. So out of having my own businesses, I always been doing what I now do and teach others. So technically the magazine was first, and because of my business background, I started to ask questions, and then I started to help brands. And about I've been doing it for the last 3 years, but officially we launched the studio around a year ago. So the magazine really led me to the studio and the consultancy, but I've been doing all the skills, everything what I do now, since when my parents started their business in 1992.
What was
so
that?
A long time.
Yeah, you've been through a few recessions with that business, right?
Yes.
What are you kind of noticing from your past experience to what we're going through now? Is there like a common thread? What are your tips for survival?
Well, what I've observed is that human behavior doesn't change. So the reaction to anything like this is very similar. So, you have some people who go into the panic mode, and they trying to do their best not to make wrong decisions, and yet they make wrong decisions, because panic to me is driven by emotion. So the emotion overtakes your decision making, and I've seen loads of businesses where, unfortunately, if you go in that direction and really let your emotion drive the decision making, there is a high chance that you're not really looking for the warning signs, and you're reacting to something rather than thinking short, medium, long term. And then on the other side, you have people who are able to step back, assess the whole situation, assess their assets, skill sets, everything possible they have available at that time, and then they start planning, and then they are able to predict almost how people will react and behave to those kind of plans when it's implemented. So when I look at previous situation or these recessions, or where markets completely drop, this is what I found. It's always the same. So the survivors are mainly those people who are able to control the nerves and go consume as much as information as they can to them, which is relevant to them. Nothing else, you don't consume anything else, even though some people think that is important. You scrap all that, and all you basically looking for are the answers which will lead you onto the correct path.
But in this situation right now, it's a little bit different because we're on a shutdown, global shutdown, right? So what are you maybe advising your clients or your community? Because you have a big community of creatives. So what are your words of advice and your tips at the moment?
The first thing, we have to recognize that there is help. You, even though it's globally, across the board, basically we all in it. It's not like when there's a recession and then there's a boom and businesses closing down when the bubble bursts and they are completely alone. And it's not that they are falling by their own fault. For example, when our business was going down, partly was due to bad decision making and really not understanding the market and how the market behaves. But on the other hand, it was due to our suppliers and our retailers who just started to close down. So it just snowballed from there. But nobody helped the retailers, and nobody helped us, and nobody helped the suppliers. So people have to recognize that because it's so widespread, and because it's in possibly every market apart from food, packaging, transportation, all the things we need now. Obviously, there is a big divide between the necessity market, like what we need, what can we buy now, and everything else, which completely hit the rock bottom. So there's a big divide between the two. And I see it as a positive because we all in it at the same time. And if the government will fulfill and implement what they're saying, there is help available, hopefully for everyone. Nobody knows what the criteria, whether there's going to be any limitations or time limitations or whatever. But to me, it all sounds that there is help available. So I think that's one of the core differences, that it's not the end of the world. If you look at other recessions, it's you basically are left to your own devices and you either swim or drown. So what I say to our clients is keep planning ahead. I think now it's crucial to keep the conversations going, because I'm all about collaborations and how we can grow through collaborations and diversifying in different markets and tapping into different markets through somebody else and collaborating on some kind of a new product or service or something which adds value to the end customer. So those conversations don't stop. They need to keep going. So whatever it was agreed before, we still going ahead with the plan, and we still negotiating, and we still brainstorming, and we still continue in that kind of conversation. And so in terms of collaborations, everything needs to carry on. And in terms of internal strategy is basically two things: observing how people behave now. So, people have now different needs. So is there anything you can do about it now? Or do you wait, for example, until this passes, and then you can start implementing other strategies? But really, coming back to now, I recommend to do 3 plans. One is for short term, one is for mid-term, one is for long term. So I normally say to people now, think about 3 months ahead, 6 months ahead, 12 months ahead, and 3 years ahead.
Wow.
And try to work out how people will behave.
How does one work this one out? How can you work this one out?
You look into the history. So you start studying what was it like when one market, for example, went down. What happened? Where was the shift? If people are tight on budget, they're not probably going to make large investments or one-off, large value investment. So you need to sort of adjust to that.
What you're saying, even though the world hasn't gone through what we're going through now, there is relevance between past crisis and recession. So kind of look at which industries suffer and how businesses adapt, rather than look for another pandemic like this one, which...
No. The human behavior, it doesn't change unless our DNA, unless we reprogram completely differently. It doesn't change. People still have the same needs. They will always look for food. They will always protect and therefore be selfish. They will always, when they're in the survival mode, their radars and their filters are completely reshuffled. They're completely different. So I would say go and study markets, how they fluctuate, what happens when the market's reaching its peak and then the bubble bursts, and then what happens immediately after that, and how it gradually goes down and then up again. So those are the crucial sort of phases in the natural sort of rhythm of markets.
Okay.
So I go and, for example, read books. I read business books, and the most value I get from biographies. So I know, for example, that there's a whole chapter in Alan Sugar on how he survived a recession or a market dip. I can pull that out of my shelf. I've got folded corners, so I can look it all up straight away, and I go, oh, this is what he's done. And even though it's not exactly the same situation, what you find that you can draw from it. So the same thing goes with Virgin. Richard Branson. He wrote few books. So I always go back and draw from that. In fashion, there are loads of biographies of brands you can draw from. You can go and, watch Very Ralph recently, which was on Netflix, and he describes how he managed to turn things around when he was left with loads of stock and he basically had only one outlet. So there are loads of case studies you can draw from.
Yeah. Okay. But so what can people do while they're reading books and all that, consuming? What else can they do practical to keep them going right now?
I think the next thing is to really observe the behavior of their customer group, or the customer profile, and so you read newspaper. I think I believe completely in knowledge. Now, knowledge is going to be your biggest competitive advantage and your biggest tool and biggest weapon. People, that's what I've learned from personal experience. If you ignore knowledge, if you underestimate the power of knowledge, now you're probably not going to pull through this. So the next step apart from the books, I would say, is to read paper and read business pages, because they give you insight how markets behave and how they react now, and who's doing what when. And like, obviously now you hear people are laying off, companies are laying off people, so that means there's going to be a massive gap, therefore everything's going to be very slow. It's going, especially for big brands, it's going to take them time to get the wheels going again. But to me, that's a massive advantage for small businesses, because you can turn the switch on straight away and fill those gaps. So, read. What I read daily. So I know that the fashion industry is really struggling. They're losing like 11 billion pounds. So sign up to, obviously, Business of Fashion, industry fashion, those kind of online platforms where you get, if you sign up to those newsletters, you get daily overview of what's going on in the industry. Mm-hmm. So you know exactly who's closing down, who's in trouble.
How is that helpful to small brands that are, let's say, mid-market to higher market, luxury brands, etc.? What can, if they're watching the industry go to pot with people becoming unemployed, how can they feel that there's a gap for their services?
Yes, so basically you have to read between the lines. Okay, so if you have that piece of information, you can probably start digging a little bit deeper and really discover where there is demand. Okay, so if people are saying, oh, well, they shut down and there's nobody else available, I don't know where to go, well, that's the gap. So you can perhaps start promoting more, invest more in marketing and advertising, and become more visible, and therefore fill in that gap. So it's not just you reading a piece of information, you keep asking, what does it mean to me? What can I do? Obviously it's very, very hard. For example, with our previous business, where over a short period of time, once Northern Rock obviously went under, not many banks were lending to self-builders, and we were depending on self-building markets. That went down. So we had to reshuffle, and instead of focusing on this group, we tried to find other groups of people who still might be buying. So we started to approach architects. Once you have that piece of information, you're trying to figure out where else. Yeah. You basically shift the attention to people who still might want to buy from you, mm-hmm. but you have to almost change the way you operate and change in your head your targeted audience. And mm-hmm. if you can do it quickly, then you can change everything, change the direction, and start being visible in that market. So within, once we saw that we couldn't really approach or communicate with the self-builders, it was basically me sending hundreds of letters with our brochures in it to architects.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you mentioned shifting. a lot of people are having to shift very quickly from offline to online, and there's a lot of opportunities. Well,
Yes. Well,
so I was going to ask how storytelling fits here, because obviously from marketing material, from being able to communicate face to face with people, they're having to do it now via websites, etc. And that's where your forte of a storyteller comes into life.
yes. So imagine, I always say, the way I describe it is almost like ants, right? You know, like one goes and everybody else follows, and then you've got this cluster of ants, you know, crawling on top of each other. Well, that's internet now. So imagine you in that kind of, and you're right in the middle of it. So imagine what you have to do to crawl over everybody else and to get to the top and say, hey, I'm here, right?
So how can they do that?
It's a very, I mean, you are now in a very saturated market. So it's so hard. Like, it's, you know, the fashion startup and the independent brands market was growing, and obviously it got quite saturated, you know, within the first level.
Yeah.
Within the startup level, it just got very saturated. So now it's like 100 times more, because you add on everything else, and obviously people now have different needs. So really, there are few things obviously you need to look at. First of all is the website functionality and the customer journey. So most websites, especially for the startups, they basically probably have just a template which is preset with certain functionality, and so you need to now revisit it and really make it much better. So you have to think about what customers want. So for example, I was reading this report and they were comparing consumers' behavior online and how they shop. In the UK, apparently you have to have not just credit card option, but the debit card. Majority of people pay by debit card, but yet internationally they prefer credit cards. So if you want to sell globally, right, not just looking internal, looking national, but international, that's the first thing I would switch on. Multi-color currency, multi-language if possible, and ability to perhaps take Amex as a payment, because Americans are, you know, they use it widely. So, you know, doing these kind of tweaks can improve or increase the chances of, you know, making that sale or taking the customer through this sale.
Yeah, I mean, having PayPal and Stripe and different payment options is always quite useful, because people prefer different things, right?
Yes.
What you mentioned customer journey. Tell us a bit about that.
Customer journey, basically, it's a design where you create different scenarios where people land on different pages. So you lead them through the website, for example, from point A to B and everything in between. So you have one option or one scenario where they land on the home page. So then you have to have call to actions, but not, I always do the design very clean. I don't put more, you know, I don't go click here, click here, click. I mean, you need to click here, and, you know, it gets very messy. So just have like 2 to 3 calls to action on the homepage, lead them to the next page, and then lead them off that page to somewhere else. If normally the behavior is, if they don't know you, or if they just came across you, or if somebody recommended you, they're probably going to check out, first of all, the about page, your values, your ethos and mission and vision, your journey so far, what you believe in. You know, everything has to be written down. What is the delivery? What are the delivery terms? Is there any cost? How quickly can I refund if I don't? You refund me if I don't like it. You know, what is the time limit I have to send off before I get my money back? So those are the types of concerns people have.
So you know the concept of know, like, trust. So if someone lands on your website, they probably know you or get to know you through going to your about page, and they get to like you through traveling through your website and your products. And the trust factor is where all the information about deliveries, refunds, etc., right?
Yes.
So
yes.
It's about going and picking.
And we have to also remember reviews. Okay, so I don't mean like Amazon 558 reviews. That could be a spam. Yeah. I mean real customers. So for example, what we do now, automatically when we do e-commerce website, under each product we have an option for people to add a review, which obviously doesn't go live until you approve it. So everything goes through you, so you have control what to sort of push out and what to keep. But yeah. Normally, and you should encourage that kind of behavior as part of your customer journey experience when they actually get the physical product.
How do you encourage it?
Physically. So when you have the box and you open the box with the product, I don't have it.
Oh, okay. So you put a little leaflet or something.
So it's like I normally do, for example, like a thank you card, which is also a voucher. So we don't just print for the sake of printing. We give that piece of paper a function. So for the next order, for example, they get £20 off. And then we have, for example, you know what I showed you, what we do. So you can have something like this. And on one of these squares, it tells you what to do next. Please give us a review. You know, so you can have this kind of mini story in there, and tell people what to do next. The next thing after that is to follow up by email. So you have everything set up on the autopilot. You leave people alone, let's say for a couple of weeks, and then you send them a nice email saying, hope you're enjoying the product. It would be really great, or we would be really grateful if you could tell us a little bit more about your experience. Like we said before, don't mention give me feedback, or you know, these kind of words you have to avoid. It's better to sort of, you know, communicate it slightly differently, but still communicate it in a way which is understandable and make them really take it further. So for example, I see loads of businesses in the food sector that they go, tell us what you think about this pesto sauce, and we give you, you know, a sample of olive oil for free with your next purchase.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so translating it to fashion, if somebody buys shoes, you can say, you know, we give you a shoe cleaner with your next purchase. Mm-hmm. Or we give you a voucher with your next purchase. So, or for your, you know, so you encourage that kind of, you're giving them incentive. Mm-hmm. So that's still part of the journey.
Okay, that's amazing. And why is the customer journey important? Why should people kind of do that?
Because this goes back to what people expect now. We are in a wave or movement where people will be shifting from meaningless shopping or consumerism to meaningful. So under this category, everything becomes more personal, and basically it means that the consumer is more conscious and they are willing to be taken on a journey. They want to be part of you, part of your journey for a long time. So having that kind of customer experience reinforces that long-term relationship.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. Okay. So then I wanted to ask you something else. If people are new to the whole concept of customer journey and storytelling, etc., and they need to move from offline to online and marry the two, where should they start? What's the starting point?
Copywriting. They have to basically change. All I see now, I see very rarely companies or brands who implement storytelling in their communication. Everything now it's like, you need to buy the shoes, you need to do this, you need to buy my stuff because my stuff is ethical and my stuff is made in the UK. It's not enough anymore. It's like there's hundreds of similar brands like you, and you all shouting the same thing. So for you to stand out, you need to really turn it around. So for example, I did a workshop on PR recently, and there was a refillable bottle maker. Let's say, it was like either well-being or I can't remember. And they communicated that this is a refillable and therefore is environmentally friendly. And I said to them, you need to turn it around and say, you are, as a brand, saving so many tons of plastic from the oceans through this bottle. Okay, so you have to turn it around and tell me what is the benefit of your product before I even know what your product is. How are you solving the problem of the current fashion industry, like the fast consumption? What is, how are you solving it? I don't want to know your unique selling points at this stage. All I care about is whether your values align to my values. So that's the first thing. Everything needs to be 360-degree turned around. So instead of telling me the benefits, it's what is the problem, what you identified as a problem, and how are you solving it?
Okay. And another question I've had from someone was, what should a website layout look like? So what's a good, there's a lot of themes, there's a lot of scrollables, there's like different trends passing by, etc. What's kind of working now, and people who are moving from offline online or looking to upgrade their online, what should they perhaps
I think the way it's going, and we're still in the infancy stages, is that eventually websites will be like videos. It will be moving. You basically open the screen and the page and you almost immersed into the brand, and everything is very visual and it's got that moving element. At the moment, the movement is provided through different effects. So sometimes you have like fade in, fade out, you have zoom in, zoom out, you have slides, coming from left to right, or vice versa. So if you can implement some of these very subtle effects, then you already a little bit, it might give you a slight advantage compared to a website which is completely still, because those kind of elements bring attention. So if you can bring attention to that movement, people start noticing what's around it, and there's a high chance that they will click on it and therefore click on the product and read it. Like now you have models which turn 360 degrees,
Yeah.
you know, so that kind of thing. Some of it obviously needs investment, but you can DIY it. You can just reshoot from every angle and upload it in stills images. And as you go through it, you know, the viewer will get that 360 degree. You achieve the final sort of effect, you know, that way as well. So I'm not saying that you have to make large investments. It's just work with what you've got, but improve on it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Another question.
And obviously, no clutter, no dated sort of. I see loads of brands that sort of supposed to be luxury, but the fonts, the branding is so dated. So everything needs to be upgraded. So you communicate what you are, who you are, and through the visuals. So the imagery has to be correct, and through the branding. So if you, it doesn't matter if in your copy you have a luxury, you know, accessory brand. It doesn't matter if you're not visually communicating it through typography, colors, and visual, like imagery. This immediately sending a message of distrust. It's like, I'm not trusting you because it just doesn't make sense.
So where can people find out more about that? Is there a website that is like a good example of how it should be done?
I think, you know,
Look at larger brands.
yes, like you do research.
Yeah.
For example, in fashion, Tory Burch is good. She's got moving elements on it. She keeps it updated. She's got timeless branding, so she can build on it.
Yeah.
She doesn't have to change the fonts. Nothing. Yeah. She's got it basically neutral and timeless, and then she can, you know, package it according to the times. Yeah. So that would be my first sort of example, but really you need to look outside. So, you know, I look everywhere. I get, you know, I look at John Lewis because they recently rebranded. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking, why did they do it? Like, they didn't need to do it, but why did they do it? And you can immediately see that in the logo, there's the movement. So obviously they want to keep up. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So just observe. It can be in beauty, fashion, interiors, anywhere, art, you know, lots of art galleries got really nice websites. Anything which is visual, I think you should study.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you. Now, before we kind of start wrapping up, I wanted to ask you, we talked about, you know, this move online and the fact that everyone is now clustering online. Hence, you know, even the connection is not so amazing. But I've noticed that quite a lot of publications are talking about how they are upping the quantity of online material that they're posting, and quite a few fashion publications are beginning to support small brands, and they're saying, send us, you know, your products, tell us what you're doing, we want to support you, we want to write about you, etc. So how should someone, because at the best of times getting attention of the press is so difficult, and you in a way are a press person because you have a magazine, can you advise people, how do they pitch themselves at this time? Because press releases no longer kind of work, they're a little bit boring. And press releases are about announcing newness. So if you're not announcing anything new, but you want to connect with people and get some exposure, how do they do that?
I think you just have to react. So at the moment, you know, like you have basically two types of PR. One is proactive and one is reactive. Proactive means that you constantly sending out, you know, on regular basis updates, or even if it's not an update, you just tweak it and send it again. So you know, and also you specifically targeting the publications where you want to be. Now, the reactive PR is mainly about spotting opportunities. Mm-hmm. So you consume, you read, and you react. If there's a brand that's been featured, you can write to them, say, you know, I recently saw you featuring so and so. Let me just introduce myself, because I also I have shared similar beliefs, but I sell a completely different product, you know, and I have this story to tell. So you know, finding these little gaps again through reading between the lines, I think is key. So you basically consume, if you want to get into, I don't know, shellacs, sign up to their newsletters and see what content they have, what content they had yesterday, what they had 2 weeks ago, what they had a month ago, and see whether there's a pattern, and then really pitch to them specifically with one product or the story or the founder story. There are different, obviously, platforms. So you can pitch your story, for example, to some women-led kind of platforms where it's about a career and where, like, self-development. So that's one. Then you can pitch some sustainable element of your either production process or the product itself onto these ethical sort of platforms. So there's a lot of places to sort of to be on. You know, you can get through, but it has to stand out.
So you're saying that basically go beyond the product and look again back to storytelling. What story can you tell? How can you?
Yes. So basically, I always, from PR perspective, you know, like within your business and everything around in the business is centered around your customer. Okay, so basically you're trying to work out what the customer wants and exceed the expectations. So the similar things applies to the press, because the press suddenly becomes your customer. And then you have to take it further and see who are their readers. So you're thinking, how can I help the person who's writing it, and how can I help the person who's reading it? Okay. So you basically have you can use your customer base, and you know, understanding your customer base, you can pull out some information from that and tailor it to the journalist, to that specific publication, because they all different. So you have to, again, study, read language, how they use words, you know, what kind of topic they cover, what are they passionate about, what is the reader passionate about, do they want some tips, do they want some motivation, what is it? And then you construct it specifically for that publication. So you have different versions. And then, you know, I always say, have your tools ready, because when you need, especially in reactive marketing, you can't be sitting, spending all day writing an email. It needs to be already done somewhere else, where you just extract or, you know, you just quickly copy and paste certain elements of that document and you send it off.
Yeah. And if people are to push, you know, to highlight their products because they want to potentially get some sales, do you think they should be showing their like lower price points or what?
Look, if it's for PR, forget about sales. That's not going to work anymore. Okay. You can't. There are, again, 4 levels of PR expectations. So you have brand awareness, which means that basically you tackling as many touch points at one time in one go. So, you know, you have your marketing touch points. So you have the billboard and the TV ad and the newspaper and the magazine and your website and all of it. So those are the touch points. So brand awareness in PR means that you are in multiple places within a short space of time, right? So yes, exactly. Then you had, so that's brand awareness. So that's a result for you. Okay. And that should be one of your expectations. The next level is exposure. So exposure means where you are in, you associate, you align your brand with a publication with high reputation, where your customers value that publication. Or in marketing terms, it means that you piggyback on somebody else who's already well respected, and you align your brands together and, expose your brands through a marketing campaign or new product. So the similar things goes with the press. You have your hit list because you know that your customer will respond to the feature emotionally and go, yes, more trust, more credibility, they're still around, now I'm ready to buy.
Yeah.
The next one is about that's what I said, the credibility.
Yeah.
So you might have another sort of subgroup where for you the PR is purely about building that credibility. So you might be, as a founder, you might want to target certain publications for interviews. So, or you might do, speaking and that kind of thing. Okay. So your credibility as a business owner and the creative director of your brand, suddenly it increases and help the brand to be pushed forward. Now, the last one is sales. And from how people consume publications now has changed so much. Like in print, I haven't heard anybody saying they got sales from a feature. Online publishers, like stylists, they are online. If you have a product which is very low price, low risk, for example, earrings for £20, people will buy that because they can't lose, or if it's even less, anything which is within a group of products where I say people don't have to think about the value. Yes, that if that's a no-brainer, then they will buy, and then you start generating sales. But I believe that it's, like in the 90s and early 2000s, there were some fashion brands which were sort of built on press spikes. Well, now that's so hard to do, especially for brands that they don't have financial backing. It's doable, but you have to hire PR agencies or experienced people or endorse a celebrity to be the face of your campaign to have those spikes. It's much harder.
So would you say that at the moment, in that case, PR is more about getting exposure, brand awareness, not necessarily sales because of how we are, but so just keep going, keep presenting yourself in front of people so that you can be top of mind when we allowed.
Exactly. Yes. And that's the aim. And this PR strategy needs to be attached to your marketing strategy and then to the sales. So those three need to work together to, help each other. So the aim is we need to be visible in many places, ideally at the same time. If you spot, for example, that something is moving on a publication somewhere and you featured, yet your Instagram is quite dead, then you have to then maybe invest in ads to boost it up, and so you have to work between marketing, advertising, PRs and sales. So it's constantly juggling those, but the aim is that they work together for you to be pushed sort of forward.
Cool. Okay, so let's wrap up. And before we go, one final question. When people are using on social media images or on their websites and just in general to, as part of keeping alive and promoting themselves, should they have text on them, or what would you suggest about images? So keep them really clean, text-free,
Yes.
or?
Yes, so obviously it depends on each brand's values and the story itself. What I find now, for example, that you have to have a mix of visuals. So obviously you have your professionally done photo shoot,
Mhm.
but that's just the first layer. Then you can have the typography, which communicates your message, and you can play around with different backgrounds, different colors, stay obviously within your branding. But that goes hand in hand. So, for example, now on websites, what we going to do more is to have a solid color and then the image on top of it, so it sort of overlaps at different corners, angles, or is really in the middle of it, so it just enhances that experience and that visual. So if you want to trigger some kind of emotional connection, so if you can use graphics or illustrations, like now more and more fashion businesses use illustrators to communicate their product,
Yeah.
or the lifestyle. So, for example, my recommendation in terms of this would be rituals. The beauty wellness brand.
Yeah.
If you notice, they don't use products in their advertising. It's normally the woman holding, a cup of tea. So,
Okay.
because their brand is about slowing down, take time for yourself, pamper yourself in your own home. That's the message. So let's remove the product and communicate what it actually means to the customer, and then you can relate to that and you go, oh my gosh, she's exactly like me. I need to go and get that tea, and then get the candle, and then get the bubble bath, and get the soap and everything else.
Amazing.
So they use illustrations, so they use leaves, like hand drawn leaves overlaid over images, or those sort of color blocks. I love using color blocks because they allow you for this kind of communication. So they allow the illustration to be laid over a solid color box, or even the model in the corner.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next one would be where the next layer up would be where you take your product and you completely create a new, almost like a photo montage.
Mm-hmm.
So you utilizing your product shots, which you can obviously use without background, and then you play around with it. So, for example, if you look at Hugo Boss' latest campaign, they've got the model, and she's basically, it's like a collage. So they cut the face into two halves, remove the half, and fill the other half with, some other element. So, it communicates still their brand, which is very clean, elegant, timeless,
Yeah.
luxury, but they only using one half of the model image and then using the technique of collaging into the other side. And that's what makes people stop, because they go, oh, it's not just a model, boring model, but this is like a piece of art.
Yeah, that's amazing. Okay, great. Let's wrap up. Where can people find you?
They can find me on estila.co is our website. Studioestila.com is our studio site. We on Instagram at Estila Mag. So that's where I post all the details and the other brands. So if you want to network, you can obviously see who's there. And I think.
Are you doing anything to support small brands, independents, etc.? Is there something people can?
Oh yes. So when you go on studioestila.com website,
Yeah.
there is an option where you can request a free brand story review and report.
Oh, that's amazing.
So yeah, yeah.
Oh,
So basically, we look at your brand, we go through all your marketing materials, including website, social media, your business card, anything physical. You send us the samples, and we look at the way you communicate your story. We sometimes have to completely redefine the story. We look at your branding, language, and we give you recommendations where you need to make those adjustments. So we've been doing this for since we launched, and I know from the data and what's coming back that once you have this report, and we make all the adjustments, it becomes the internal document of that business. And if you stick to it and refer to it, suddenly we have brands that are being, asked by publishers for quotes as experts.
wow.
There are brands that are now being approached by other industry brands, and now they work together on a project. We know that when you pitch it, and even to the same journalist, but you pitch it in a new, refreshing way. We have brands that got themselves into Times, the Times, the Financial Times supplement. The one on Sunday.
Yeah.
It just starts to attract the right people, and that's what I say. Coming briefly back to PR, that's what you want to achieve in PR, that you send it off and you start generating the traction. So that's what the storytelling can give you. It starts to attract not just the press, but the industry experts and other brands who you can collaborate with, and then take it further into partnerships and grow that way.
Yeah.
So
Amazing.
yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll catch up again and do something different topic. There's plenty to chat about.
Yes, definitely.
Cool. Okay.